All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is on Is Your Payment App the Weakest Link? Why Payment Software Security Needs a New Baseline in India. Thank you to everyone who's joined us on the webinar today. Couple of reasons why we chose to talk about this topic now. As India processes billions of digital transactions every month, the security of the software behind those systems, I think, can no longer be an afterthought. Regulators are raising expectations, threats are evolving, and of course, legacy approaches to application security are falling short, which is exactly why we thought we are here to discuss what a new security baseline for payment software should look like. Now, we are pleased to have two experienced payment security experts from CISA joining us today. Our first speaker, Mr. Rohan Mahadik, is the Associate Director and Head of Payment Security Compliance at CISA. With over 23 years of experience in information security, governance, risk, and compliance, he leads CISA's PCI Swift and regulatory compliance practice. Rohan is also a certified PCI QSA, CISM, and ISO 27001 lead auditor and lead implementer. Joining him on the call today is Mr. Shaik Saifulla, Associate Director at CISA. With over 10 years of experience, he specializes in payment application security and secure software development. As a PCI SSF QSA and a PCI QSA, he has worked extensively with payment software vendors, fintechs, and financial institutions to strengthen software security and achieve PCI Secure Software Standards compliance. Together, they bring deep industry expertise and practical insights that they will be sharing today into the topic that I mentioned earlier. All right, with that, I'd like to hand over the session to our speakers. Shaik, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Aparna, for your wonderful introduction. Okay, so hope I'm audible loud and clear, right? Aparna, team?
Yeah, very well.
Yeah,
Yes, you are. Please continue.
perfect. Thank you. Hello, everyone. A very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the time zone from which you have joined this today's webinar. Okay. First of all, thank you all, for taking time from your busy schedules to be part of this particular session. So over the next, 45 minutes, okay, we're gonna uh, discuss about, okay, the evolving landscape of payment application security. And we'll also discuss the common security challenges, okay, like what organizations are facing today. We'll also have practical observations from real world software security assessments. And we'll also see how this PCI software security framework can build secure, resilient, and compliant payment applications. Okay, so let me quickly walk through today's agenda. So we'll begin by understanding the current challenges, right, in payment software security and why traditional, security approaches not are no longer sufficient. Okay, so we'll also discuss in the same way, like we'll also discuss which types of payment applications are typically eligible. That is one of the very frequent question. Okay, we used to get from vendors or from customers, right? So we'll also discuss which applications are eligible for PCI Secure Software Standard. And very important thing, okay, recently, like we also got, the transition timelines, right, from PCSSE, transition from 1.2.1 to 2.0. That also, like, we're gonna cover. In the same way, like we'll also gonna cover few, very interesting topics or hot topics. Like, for example, we're gonna talk about software bill of materials, or SBOM, you can call it as, and what is the importance of this and how it is going to impact the supply chain, right? That we'll discuss here. Then, very important thing, and then we'll also spend some time on sharing, real observations, or the real case studies from our PCS3, learning from our PCS3 engagement. So these are based on, practical scenarios, okay, we encountered during working with our payment software vendors. I'll also discuss, some common security by design gaps and recommended from CISA, right? Like what are the recommendation from CISA to address those particular challenges? Okay, so first I'll start with, before we get into PCI secure software, okay, let's first understand why this standard has become so important over the last few years. If you look at today's payment applications, right, okay, they're no longer, simple like ATM and POS applications, which are going to sit inside the ATM terminals or POS machines, or going to sit inside an bank environment. Now we have, cloud native applications, we have API driven applications, we have applications, which are integrated with multiple third party services, right? And these are deployed, several times a week. So during our assessment, one common observation is that organizations have excellent, infrastructure security where, this application has been deployed, but application itself still has gaps in areas like, API security, right? And dependency management or secure coding. So that's exactly where the PCI, secure software comes into the picture. It focuses on securing the software itself, not just the environment in which, that application has been deployed. Now, before we get into PCI S3 standard in detail, right? Let's first understand like what the regulators across the world are expecting, from organizations who are developing this payment softwares or payment applications. If you look at, regulators like RBI or, the NPCI or payment brands and even global cyber security regulations, one common, theme or expectation is emerging. They may use, different terminology, but their expectation is same. What is that expectation? Payment software should be secure by design. And second, okay, that software should be, continuously monitored once it is deployed, right? Okay, so it should be, continuously monitored, and that software should be resilient against evolving cyber threats. Look at, some of these expectations here. Right. So now, so as we discussed, right, okay, like if you take NPCI, regulators or payment brands or even like other global cyber security regulations, like, okay, so they're looking these particular expectations. Now, so that first expectation from, regulatories or from these respective stakeholders that the application should be developed in secure development process. For example, if today's organizations are expected, to integrate security, okay, right from the design phase. Okay, if you take, any software development life cycle, right? Okay, it starts from information gathering. Then we have, uh, design, right? Then we have development, we have testing, release, build, maintenance. Okay, so we have all these phases in software development lifecycle. So today's organizations are expected to, integrate security right from the design phase, not at the testing phase or at the last phase before releasing the application. That's mean following secure SDLC practice, adopting, secure coding guidelines, performing code reviews, conducting security testing, and ensuring that security is embedded throughout the software development lifecycle. Security should become part of the development process rather than an activity performed just, before deploying that application. The second expectation, from these particular stakeholders is cyber resilience. This is, one of the very important point, or like I want to highlight here. So nowadays, okay, cyber threats are evolving continuously. Nobody can deny that, right? Attackers are no longer targeting just infrastructure, right? They are, increasingly exploiting weakness in applications, APIs, and even business logic as well. And recently we have seen, okay, the attacks even on software supply chains as well, right? So here organizations are expected not to prevent attacks. Okay, not only to prevent attacks, but also to detect, respond, and recover quickly when such incidents occurs. In other words, security is not about preventing every attack. It's about ensuring that application remains resilient even when attacks happens. Right. The next expectation is, this is third-party risk management. This is one of the other, expectation, if you ask me. So here, okay, very few organizations, build everything in house today, because we used to work with vendors and even with banks and other stakeholders, right? Okay, if you ask me, okay, so it's very difficult that one bank or one organization have all in-house developed payment applications, right? So applications nowadays depends on cloud providers, right? So also on SDKs, we also have payment gateway applications, we have authentication service, we also have open source libraries and many other third party components. Okay, so we have all these from vendors or from third party vendors, right? So regulators increasingly expect organizations to access these vendors before onboarding them. So like for example, like once we onboard, okay, we have to keep an eye and we have to continuously monitor them for security risk throughout the relationship. Correct. Now, so the next is about again, this is we're going to discuss more in the further slides. Okay, so this is kind of a uh, high level we're going to touch here. So this is very specific to software supply chain security. So we have observed, okay, like recent incidents like Log4Shell, right? Okay, so it's clearly demonstrated that a vulnerability in just one open source component can impact thousands of organizations worldwide, right? So that's why maintaining visibility into software dependencies and validating software integrity and managing SBOM have become critical now. Finally, security cannot be treated as one time activity. You agree with me, right? Okay, so applications evolve continuously. All right, okay, we have new releases, we have patches, we have configuration changes, and we also have uh, future enhancements in the applications, right? So here organizations are expected to perform this continuous vulnerability management, security testing, and even change validation to ensure that every release maintains the intended security portion. Now that's that we understand what the expectations, right? Okay, from regulators. Okay, now let's take a step back and look at how payment software security standard like PCI S3 have evolved over the years. This evolution ultimately led to introduction of software security framework from PADSS, providing a more comprehensive and future ready approach to securing the payment software. With that context, okay, I would like to hand over to Rohan, who will walk us through the different types of payment softwares that should be evaluated for software security and how PCSS applies to those specific applications. We are not able to hear you.
I was on mute. Sorry, I was speaking on mute.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Saif. There are some known faces, known names in the participant list, so it should be a comfortable discussion. Okay, let's look at the evolution of payment software security standard. The journey was interesting. The journey started in 2008 with payment application best practices, PABP, with an objective to encourage software vendors to build payment applications securely and reduce common security risk. Okay, as per payment application became more widely adopted, in October 2009, PCI Security Standard Council introduced PADSS, that was Payment Application Data Security Standard. PADSS served the industry for almost more than 6 years now. Yeah, it was introduced sometime in 2009 and it was there till 2016. Long journey. Over the years, PADSS also went through multiple revisions to address new security challenges, support evolving technologies, and improve software security practices. Between 2016 and 2020, the software development landscape was also changing significantly. Yeah, the organization adopted agile development, DevOps, CI/CD pipelines, API microservices, containers, open source components, and the traditional checklist-based approach was no longer sufficient to address these modern software development practices. Recognizing this, in January 2020, PCI Security Standard Council introduced the PCI Software Security Framework, PCI SSF. Moving to the next slide. Now when PCI SSF was introduced, there were a lot of queries from our customers, and from software development vendors. What is PCI SSF? Does that make me compliance? Or is it different from PCI SSS, different from PCI SSLC? What if I'm certified with PCI SSS? Am I certified with PCI SSF? So let's clarify on PCI SSF. So PCI SSF is an overall framework. Okay, it is a combination of both PCI SSS and PCI SSLC. When PCI SSF was introduced by PCI Security Standard Council, they differentiated, they categorized the software development organization and a software product into different buckets, and for that, they brought an independent compliance standard. So PCI SSS, we call it PCI S3, that is the standard which focuses on the software product. Yeah. In PCI SSS, we assess the security of the payment software itself. The payment software itself will be assessed. Whereas a PCI SSLC focuses on the software development of an organization. Okay. Assessment of the vendor software development lifecycle. Most recently, PCI Security Software version 2.0 has been also introduced to further align with today's payment ecosystem. One of the biggest changes in the shift to focus from protecting only payment data to protecting sensitive assets. Now, the sensitive assets broadly covers sensitive data, sensitive resources, and sensitive functions, such as cryptographic keys, source code, configurations, security logs, any dependencies, and other critical resources that support payment functionality overall. Yeah. So with 2.0, they are more focusing on sensitive assets than the previous version of 1.2.1 focusing on payment data. Yeah. We can move to the next slide. Okay. So some of the common queries we receive from customers on the understanding of the new standard. Which compliance standard in PCI SSF applies to us? Does my application actually need a PCI Secure Software Assessment? The answer depends on whether your software performs payment-related functions or handles sensitive assets associated with payment processing. Now let's see what payment application should be assessed for security services. Let's look at few common examples here. Payment gateways. Payment gateways are probably the most common examples because they authorize, process, or route payment transactions between merchants, banks, and payment processes. Since they play a critical role in payment processing, securing this application is extremely important. Next, soft POS. Another growing area in soft POS. Instead of dedicated payment terminals, merchant can now accept card payment directly on commercial off-the-shelf Android devices. Because of these applications handle payment transaction on consumer devices, they need strong software security controls. Then there is ATM application, card management systems. Card management system is another good example. These systems are responsible for card issuance, lifecycle management, PIN management, and related payment operations. They may not always directly interact with customers, but they manage highly sensitive payment functions. Mobile banking component, Many organizations ask whether mobile banking applications are covered. The answer is it depends. If the mobile application contains payment functionality or components responsible for payment processing, authentication, or protecting sensitive assets, those components may be eligible for an assessment. Payment SDKs. This is also a critical application. Today, many payment providers distribute software development kits. We call it SDKs, which are integrated into merchant applications. Since vulnerabilities in SDK can affect hundreds or even thousands of applications, securing these components is equally important. Then authentication modules, tokenization systems. Tokenization system is also the application that replaces sensitive payment data with tokens. This reduces the exposure of actual cardholder data. But the security of the entire tokenization process depends on the application itself. Hence, the systems are also strong candidate for PCI Secure Software assessments. Moving to the next slide. Now let's look at what is PCI SSLC. The basic difference here is the PCI SSLC evaluates the software vendor's development and maintenance processes. It assesses the organization, not the specific product. Yeah, this is the basic difference. PCI SSLC is assessing the organization, not a product. It assesses whether secure development practices are consistently followed across the organization. Let's look at key areas of secure SLC. Secure design, threat modeling. Threat modeling is proactive security engineering practice that analyze a system's architecture, data flows, assets, and potential attack vectors to identify threats, evaluate risks, and implement appropriate security controls throughout the system lifecycle. Then secure coding, security testings covering SAST, DAST, DAST, API testing, penetration testing, release control. Release control is important process of managing software release to ensure that applications are tested, approved, and deployed in a controlled, secure, and traceable manner. Yeah, we should know which application is being released, whether it has gone through the proper change management process and it is tested, approved by the stakeholders. So the release control plays a critical role. Last but not the least is vulnerability management. It is a practice of continuously finding and fixing security weakness in software throughout its life cycle to reduce the risk of exploitation. Okay, so we spoke about PCI SSS, that is PCI S3 and PCI SSLC. Moving to the next slide. Now we understood the basic difference between PCI SSS and PCI SSLC. Here is a short summary with a key differentiator. This is maybe a takeaway to understand, what is PCI SSS and PCI Secure SLC. PCI SSS is a product focused, whereas the Secure SLC is a process focused. Okay, PCI SSS assess the software, PCI SSLC assess the development practices. With PCI SSS, a software listing is possible. If you are assessing your software, a product, it is possible that you can go ahead and list that product on PCI portal. It is not mandatory though. Whereas SSLC is a company level validation. You are validating, you are certifying an organization. This gives an assurance to the client that the organization consistently followed secure software development process. In SSS, secure code review is mandatory, where in SSLC, SDLC controls are validated. Okay, with this, we can have a 10-second break to take a poll question, and we will move on to the most interesting discussion of this webinar, where my colleague Saif will walk you through. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Rohan, for covering this particular evaluation and setting the context specific to S3 and SSLC, right? Now, so now, as we discussed in our agenda, right? Okay, so this is the transition timelines. Okay, like recently, like we got the clarity from council. Okay, so from past couple of months, okay, like we got many queries from the customers saying that okay, hey, like what is the timeline? Okay, the PCS 3 1.2.1 is still valid or not? Okay, like when council is saying it's mandatory, right? Now we have answers. Okay, so now we got the clarity from the PCI council, right? Okay, now let's talk about this most important update, okay, that from PCS 3 or from PCI council, that specific to transition, right? So now, if let's assume if your organization is currently planning for PCI S3 engagement, which is secure software, assessment. So these dates are something, okay, we should definitely be aware of, right? The first is, the transition, okay? So from 1.2.1 to 2.6, right? It is already started. Okay. Now the council has released 2.0. Okay, and they started accepting these engagements from June month, right? Now from this point onwards, if you ask us, both PCS3 1.2.1 and 2.0 will be available for new assessments during this particular transition period. So this gives organizations, sufficient time, right? Okay, to understand the new requirements and perform gap assessments, update the process or update the software lifecycle process or policies, and prepare for version 2.0. The next milestone is 30th April 2027. So this is important, date we should know. Why? Because this is the last date on which QSA can submit an full assessment, ROV, AOV, and security guidance document, other supporting documents to council or to the AQM as part of the review process. After this particular date, council is not going to accept any submissions as part of PCS3 version 1.2.1. So if we miss, what will happen? Okay, for example, okay, we used to share these documents or complete this submission before 30th April 2027. That's mean, so if we miss that, okay, we have to move to the latest version, which is PCS3 version 2.0. Perfect. Now, what is going to happen? Okay, let's assume May 1st, 27. Okay, so version 2.0 becomes mandatory for all new full assessments. So any organization starting a fresh CI secure software assessment, so after this date must comply with version 2.0. So one more important date that organization often overlook is 31st July 2027. So submitting, like ROV, AOV, and supporting documents to council before this particular date, that mean that okay, the particular PCS3 version 1.2.1, the specific application is listed. No. For example, okay, if assessments, what if submission has been done, that also have to be reviewed by PCI AQM and that need to be completed. So if the review is not completed successfully by then, okay, we would need to move to transition from 1.2.1 to 2.0. So there are couple of FAQs, okay, that we are getting very frequently from the customers, right? The one very frequent question like what we have received so far is CISA. Okay, let's assume if application is already listed, because as of now, if you take, applications are already listed for version 1.2.1. Okay, so whether those validations or, certifications are still valid, right? Okay, the answer is yes. If application is validated and listed under the PCA SS3 website, Okay, and that certification is valid till that expiry date. Okay, so what is the expiry date? Okay, it is provided on the PCI portal. Till that time, okay, the particular certification or validation is still valid. However, okay, no new PCS 3 1.2.1 assessments will be accepted after the transition deadline. Perfect. Now, so applications, right? Okay, so requiring revalidation after this transition should be assessed against the PCI S3 version 2.0. So once we complete this particular timeline, okay, so for example, if we have to do any, high impact or low impact assessments, okay, after this particular date, which is April 27, okay, so council is, not going to accept any such the validations, right? And now, so another important thing, okay, so organizations should also plan their migration well before their current listing expired, okay, to avoid any, disruption. So that is one of the FAQ one. And FAQ two, like what we have received so far, okay, what is the right time to start the PCS3 2.0 engagements, right? So this is also, like as I said, a very frequent question, like what we have received from the customers, all right? To answer that, organizations, okay, should begin planning, right, and initiating a PCS3 2.0 assessment at the earliest or now. Why? Because starting early, provides several advantages. Okay, we have, adequate time to understand and implement new PCS3 control objectives. Okay, if you have already gone through, okay, like, so there are a couple of major changes have been done in version 2.0 compared to 1.2.1, specifically on the scoping part, right? Okay, now we'll have enough time, to understand and implement the new requirements, or like, preparing that SAID inventory document and all. Okay, and second thing is, okay, we also have, opportunity, or buffer time to remediate the gaps, because once we have new control objectives, new requirements, so obviously the action points or gaps will be new, right? Okay, so we'll have, enough time, right, to mitigate all those particular gaps, and we can also avoid, the last minute rush as well, all right? And we'll what is that for example, okay, so we can reduce the business risk as well. Okay, if our listing is mapped with business requirement or business expectation, right? Okay, then we can reduce that as well. Okay, so if we start this particular engagement at the earliest now. So this is, as we discussed in our agenda. Okay, so this is one of the hot topic, you can see. Okay, so everywhere, okay, like you can see that importance of SBOM, right? Okay, so in many places, if you see in many articles, okay, so if you just take like 1 year back, okay, you haven't heard, this SBOM that much frequently. Okay, now you can see like everywhere, you can see that articles, you can see, webinars, you can see sessions, right, on this particular SBOM. Okay, and you can also see nowadays, okay, there are applications as well. Okay, many organizations are spending, uh, time, okay, and resource to develop application to support this particular SBOM. Okay, now we'll deep down and we'll discuss about like what is SBOM, how it is going to impact our organization. Okay, so how we have to maintain that SBOM, right? All these areas we're going to cover in next couple of minutes. Okay, so now if you just go back to December, right? Okay, 21. Okay, when Log4j vulnerability, right? Okay, was publicly disclosed. Within a few hours, security team across the globe were asked a very simple question, right? Are we using Log4j, right? And you would think that, okay, that's an easy question to answer, but that time it was not, right? But surprisingly, thousands of, organizations struggled, okay, to get the details, okay, whether, okay, our application is dependent on Log4j, or do we have any APIs which are assisting, okay, or is it coming from any third party library, right? Okay, so that was a challenge that time, right? So now, if you see, many organizations, spend days or even weeks, okay, not to address not to mitigate that vulnerability, okay, just to figure it out, okay, whether we have log4j in our environment or not. It's not because they are lacked skilled security teams, but because they simply didn't have that visibility into software components inside their own applications. This is exactly the problem, right? That SBOM, which is software bill of material, is designed to solve. Think of an SBOM as ingredient list of your applications. Okay, just like every packaged food item tells you exactly what is there inside. All right. In the same way, an SBOM tells you exactly what software components make up your application. Okay, so in PCI 3, if you say like for current 1.2.1 version, okay, so the module C specifically call out about SBOM. Okay, so there are many requirements mapped, okay, specific to SBOM as well. Now, so typically, what is SBOM, right? Okay, typically an SBOM records information. Okay, if you see my slide, right? Okay, so you can see like what is the component name, what is the version, who is the supplier or publisher, and whether we have license or open source that particular library, and whether this dependency is direct or indirect. So this information becomes extremely valuable when a new vulnerability is announced or discovered, right? Okay, so now we understood about log4j. Now we understood, okay, like why we need this SBOM. Okay. Now let's take another example. Okay. Let's say tomorrow a critical vulnerability is discovered in OpenSSL. Okay. Instead of again, manually searching throughout, thousands of files or asking, development team or, DevSec team. Okay. So you can simply look at the SBOM inventory within minutes. Okay, like which applications are affected, which version is being used, and which teams need to act, right? So that reduce your response time. Okay, instead of spending weeks like how it happens in the case of log4j, right? We don't have to spend time energy there. Okay, so if we have SBOM, okay, so it's we can refer the particular bill of material sheet, table, or application, and we can conclude, and we can take a call what is next. Now, so SBOM is no longer just a compliance requirement, right? Now it's becoming an essential capability for our software, supply chain security and incident response as well. Okay. Now, how should an SBOM be maintained? Okay, as I said, okay, like in module C, there are a couple of sub requirements or sub objectives, control objectives, right? Okay, which talks more about SBOM, like how to maintain SBOM, right? Okay, so there are a couple of control objectives. So, okay, that we'll try to discuss here. Couple of, right? Now, one important misconception I would like to clarify. Many organizations think of SBOM as a document that is, prepared one time just before an any PCI engagement or any specific engagement. That's not the intention. Okay, the SBOM should be a kind of a living document. Every time a developer adds a new library, right, or deletes or removes any particular component, or adding any existing dependency, or changing the framework or upgrading the framework, okay, the SBOM should also be updated frequently. Whenever such change happens, right, that SBOM should also update it. Okay. Now, if you see the table, okay, like as we have mentioned couple of examples as well to make it easy for our audience. If you see here, so we have mentioned OpenSSL, we have also mentioned Log4j, and we'll also highlighted Bouncy Castle as well, right? So here in each case, okay, like we have to identify this is bare minimum. Okay, so we can have many other info or details as well, but bare minimum, we should have these basic details. For example, which version I'm using, who is supplying this, application or library or component, and we'll also should have whether this is licensed or open source component or open source library, and whether it's a direct dependency or an indirect dependency. That is also very clearly it's explained in PCS3 module C. So this information becomes extremely useful when any new vulnerability or license issues are identified. Okay. Now, as we discussed, okay, so this is part of the PCS3 requirement. Okay. Now, the objective is not simply to maintain a table tracker or spreadsheet. Okay. The objective is to ensure organizations always know what software components they're using it. Okay, what software libraries my application is integrated with. All right, so these are like understand this associated risk and can respond quickly whenever new vulnerabilities emerge. Now, so this is my favorite slide for today. Now I'd like to share a few practical use cases. Okay, so if you would have worked with us, okay, like you already familiar the way like we used to perform, like how deeply like we'll assess these applications, right? So what we have done, okay, so what are the test cases, okay, like we're going to discuss now. There are three use cases, okay, like we have highlighted here. These are not hypothetical scenarios, okay, so these are like completely based on our common observations we have made while assessing different types of payment applications. So these examples represent real world security challenge and the recommendations we have provided to help organizations strengthen their security by design practices. First, let me share one of the most interesting observations. Okay, we have made during the PCS3 assessments. This is not a typical, compliance finding. Okay, it's a software, design issue you can consider. During several engagements. Okay, it's not specific to ATM. It's not specific to the POS applications, and it's not even specific to only payment gateways. Okay, like we have observed this observation, kind of a default observation in all the application types, whether it's you call it as CMS, whether it's ATM, POS, or reconciliation, settlement, even kiosk applications, right? This is one of the very common observations we have observed. What is that? Is that okay? So we observed that when application processing that sensitive data, such as PAN number, CVV2, or track2, or cryptographic keys, or tokens, right? So at the back end, there are like immutable objects, okay, like which are actually dealing with this particular data or managing this particular data elements. So while this application was not storing this information in the database, right, in the logs, when we have done that engagement, okay, when we have done this forensic activity or database review or log review, so we haven't observed the clear card data in the database or in the logs in majority of the cases, all right, but it was still being retained in the application memory, which is temporary memory, right? Okay, so during that, transaction processing. Now, so there are two concepts, okay, like, we have to discuss and we have to get the clarity. One is the immutable objects, second is, the mutable objects. So, what is that and how we can address this and everything, okay, we're going to discuss here. So now, so if you see, right, okay, so what exactly is immutable objects? Okay, so an immutable object is one, okay, object, okay, whose content cannot be modified once it has been created. If application needs to perform any operation, for example, application has to mask, application has to truncate or hash the particular card number, so this particular object creates another object instead of modifying or reusing that existing one, right? Okay, it is going to create another objective. So this means that during a single transaction there may be multiple copies of the same sensitive data residing in the memory. Now I'll explain why this is risk, right? The challenge is that okay, developers doesn't have complete control over when these objectives are removed from the memory. For example, if you take the PCI DSS or PCI S3 or even other PCI standards, it says that so the sensitive authentication data, like we have track data, we have pin block, encrypted pin block, or we have CVV, right? So this particular data should not be stored after authorization or after completing the transaction cycle, right? So now what is the challenge that okay? So the challenge is that okay, since developer doesn't have that complete broader picture, okay, so developers or respective stakeholders assumes that once the transaction is completed, the sensitive data automatically disappears, or garbage collector will invoke and it will clear the data. That's not the case, right? Okay, so as like Java garbage collector or any specific garbage collector, it will not invoke after each transaction. Okay, so it have their own time, right? So once it is occupied or like then only it will invoke and particularly delete the data. Now, what happens, right? Okay, as part of the PCS3 engagement, okay, we used to perform forensic analysis on both what is volatile and even on the non-volatile memory as well. So, what we have observed here when we have done that forensic analysis on the memory tab, okay, so where due to malware or debug sessions, right? Okay, if there is any what is that crash dump or forensic analysis dump, right? So when we have done the forensic activity, we have observed in one of the recent. So what is the snap we have highlighted in that PPT, right? Okay, so this is one of the recent, okay, where we have observed 3,000 plus the clear card numbers. So here, we just added one snap, but so it's not limited to only PAN. Okay, when we have taken that dump, right? Okay, we have observed PAN, we have also observed, track data, we have also observed some other sensitive data as well, right? So it is not recommended, to use the immutable objects. So it is always recommended to use the mutable objects. Like we have, example. This is not, specifically called out in PCS2 standard. Okay, like we can use string builder, we can use string buffer, right, to specifically to securely delete the data. Now, so what is the recommendation? If you ask the recommendation from CISA is okay, one, it is we should use mutable objects. This is specific to only handling the sensitive data. Okay, we are not calling out for other data. Okay, it is very specific to only sensitive data here, right? So now the second very important point. Okay, like we need to call out that. So it's not just about using mutable objects or calling the null function. No, for example, if the particular objective is handling like 19 digits card number, so we also have to ensure that okay, so that particular 19 digits data, right, it will be replaced with 19 zeros. Then that particular application should call the null function so that the data should be securely deleted. Okay, and when if there is any memory crash, OS crash, and even if we perform forensic activity, right, we should not able to found this particular data in the memory. So this is one, and there are other two test cases. Okay, like so the second, the test case is specific to configuration drift. So when we this is another common observations like we have observed during our PCI S3 engagements or during the PCI DSS engagement that originally, okay, so when we developed this application during this PCI S3, right, okay, so this is end of the day, this is application is going to deploy inside the PCI DSS environment, right, the bank or a service provider. However, over the time, the support or business requirement or legacy integrations configurations start changing. For example, the TLS configuration has been changed, right? So what will happen? Okay, so the biggest challenge is that okay, software that was originally validated is no longer the same software that is actually running in production. So that's why it is important to establish a secure deployment baseline, assess every configuration change for secure impact, and periodically verify that production environment continue to meet the validated security posture. So this other, case study is specific to, business logic abuse and transaction flow security. It's not always, depending on performing the testings. For example, technical testings like verifying whether my application is vulnerable to SQL or HTML or, cross-site scripting or not. Okay, we also have to give attention to business logic as well. So in many cases, like when we do testings, we have also observed that, okay, the same payment request or same tokens can be reused. Okay, like if we have, tools like Bubsuit, okay, like we can play around, okay, we can reuse the same, particular section. Okay, so we also have to ensure that, okay, we should give attention to our business logic security as well, because ultimately secure software is not just about writing the code. Okay, we also have to ensure that, okay, our application business logic behaves securely under both expected and even unexpected conditions as well. Right. So now we have spent, 40 to 45 minutes, okay, discussing about, PCI S3. We also talked about SSLC. We also talked about, the challenges. We also talked about, the expectations from the regulatory, right? Now, I would like to answer one question that, almost every organization asks before starting an any PCI S3 engagement. So what is that question? Okay. So what is the business value? Why should we invest in PCI Secure Software Assessment? From our experience, organizations, okay, don't pursue the PCI S3 just because of compliance. They pursue it because it delivers measurable business and, security benefits, right? So let me, yeah, start with, customer trust here. Today's, merchants, or if you take banks, right, service providers and enterprise customers expect more than a just future-rich payment application. Okay, they expect a secure payment application. All right. When your software has undergone an independent PCS3 assessment, okay, you're no longer asking customers to trust your security claims instead of, claiming that, okay, hey, like my application is more secure. So when this application has gone through independent validation, demonstrated that, okay, the security has been built into the product, so that gives and customers greater confidence when selecting an application and deploying your application in the particular environment, right? So how? So along with just, customer trust, okay, along with that, okay, so how it's gonna make it, competitive differentiate. Okay, so because we used to take part in, pre-sales, and we used to take part in many other calls. Okay, so we have also observed that, many organizations or banks or financial institutes, okay, are also looking, okay, as part of their RFPs, whether this application is, secure. Okay, for example, this application has been gone through PCS3 validation, or organization is complying to, PCI SSLC life cycle policies, and complying to SSLC, right? So this is one of the frequently asked question as well, right? So this is going to add more value, right? Okay, it helps organization, okay, stand out in the crowded marketplace if my application is, PCI3 validated, right? And that the third benefit, okay, what we're going to have is this independent assurance. So for example, okay, if we have internal security reviews, okay, but customers are increasingly want assurance from an independent and recognized, assessment process. So this PCI S3 provides objective evidence that, okay, application has been evaluated against, international, accepted this particular standards. So this independent assurance can significantly reduce the effort involved in, customer security reviews and the vendor due diligence. Okay, so, and another important thing I want to highlight here, okay, so if you see here, so ultimately the PCS3 is not just, about obtaining a certificate or getting listed on the PCSC website. No, it's about building, payment software that customers trust. Okay, that, engineering teams can confidently maintain, and that organization can continuously improve as new technologies and cyber threats evolve. So during this, customer interactions, we have noticed that, okay, so security related questions are becoming much more detailed. Customers are no longer asking only whether this application is PCI compliant. Okay, they're also asking how that, vulnerabilities are managed, how third-party libraries are monitored, whether SBOM is maintained or not. Okay, how we are protecting the cryptographic keys, right? Okay, so these are, couple of questions are asked during this particular, particular process. Perfect. So finally, okay, so now we will wrap up this by exploring, by why organizations are increasingly, choosing PCI secure software validation. Okay, not only to meet compliance requirements, right? Okay, but also to enhance their software security, right? And also to build, customer confidence and differentiate themselves in the market. So before we conclude, okay, like you will now receive a quick poll survey. We would appreciate, okay, if you if you just take a minute to complete it, and then we'll open the floor for your questions and have interactive Q&A section here. I request to take a minute to complete this poll, and then floor is open for a Q&A session. Please also feel free to, okay, like to add your questions in the chat box, okay, so that we can take it up if you have any specific question. I can see that, okay, Rajesh has raised hand. Okay, if you don't mind, can you please add your question in the chat box?
I'm unable to type. The host has disabled attendees chat.
Oh, hey, yeah. So maybe meanwhile, like host will try to address that. Okay, if you have questions, please feel free to raise it here, Rajesh. We'll be
Yeah.
happy to.
See, I got a few questions online. One
Mhm.
starts with the requirements of the PCI DSS with regards to the latest framework like requirement checklist. The
Correct.
second thing is, are we aligning to any? See, PCIDS is an independent body, and definitely they got their own requirements to satisfy to get certified. And when it comes to the RBI regulations, for example, yeah, so RBI regulations also have released certain financial crimes or financial fake transactions or something like that to investigate. And not only RBI, I'm just talking in general to the compliance perspective.
Understood.
So, do we have any of that sort included in our tool so that not only just providing the PCI DSS features, but also to select according to the compliance requirement? Maybe we are serving USA, maybe we are serving Middle Eastern client or something like that. So we can help them quickly to align in both the aspects. That's all my question.
Okay, so are we referring to which tool here? Okay, for better clarity.
No, I mean to say, I'm a partner with CISA. Okay, my company is CyberArk MSP Consulting Services.
Correct.
I'm from Hyderabad, and definitely your products are worthful to present to my clients. So I'm just trying to understand when we talk about the latest version about the PCI DSS. So our platform also should have that kind of cutting edge features so that it becomes easy to pitch in front of the clients.
That's correct. Okay, I completely agree with you. Okay, so this is also like very very frequent question. Okay, that we used to receive from the customer. How this is S3 is different from PCI DSS. Okay, so as you know, when it comes to DSS, okay, it's not limited to only application, right? In DSS, in scope, we have network devices, we have routers, we have switches, we have database, we have DC, DR. We also have HR will also have, people process as well. All right. Now, when it comes to PCS3, okay, it is limited to only application and their respective integrations. For example, if my application is dependent on HSM, if my application is, interacting with a core banking server, if my application is, dependent on the pin pad device, right? So it's limited. The scope is here very limited to application and the respective integrations here. Okay. But to answer your question, that is completely right. Okay. So the way, okay, the PCI S3 2.0 has been drafted. Okay. So now you can see like many requirements are speaking the same language. Okay. Like what we can see in PCI DSS. For example, you can take example of, masking, right? You can take example of protecting of the data. All right. Okay. So if you see that DSS and PCI S3, right, okay, it's speak the same language. For example, there should be an, two set of keys, and it is always recommended to use, the latest encryption algorithm. Okay. So there should be a seed value which is generated by using secure RNG. So now both the standards are in sync. Okay. And so recently I also heard that, okay, like, council is going to come back now with latest the PCI DSS version as well. Okay, so soon we're also planning to have webinar on DSS 5.0 as well. Okay, once the council releases, okay, like we'll some time to observe, and then we'll come back with one more session on PCI DSS as well. Right, and specific to the tools, okay, definitely, like, we'll see like how we can map S3 as well, and the respective stakeholders, okay, might will reach out to you. Okay, so they will give kind of, demo, like whatever is the expectation expecting from our end, right, Mr. Rajesh, that can be provided from the respective account manager.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do we get any reference notes of this webinar, or to just go through?
We are discussing, yeah, we are finalizing that part. Okay, so for sure, like we're gonna have something. Okay, like once it's finalized, okay, that we'll be sharing with all the respective stakeholders. But yes, okay, that we are planning to have kind of, take key takeaways that need to be shared with the stakeholders.
Yeah, that becomes easier for us to convince to the clients. That's the reason.
Exactly, exactly. Not only to convince, even for our, reference as well, because the 2.0 is new, right? Okay, so we're trying to highlight the key topics or key areas that we have covered, so that it will be easy to have handy. Okay, sure. Thank you, Mr. Rajesh. Team, any
Thank
other questions? We already, past 4 minutes with interest of time of stakeholders. Okay, I'll take it as no. Rohan, you wanna say something?
No, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Hope you liked the session. And if you have any queries, you may drop it to our email IDs. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.